Good morning, party people. Welcome to Office Hours, the show where you post your SQL Server and Azure SQL questions, and I answer those. As I'm heading out for a vacation tomorrow to Telluride, Colorado. Absolutely love it. Hey, SQL Dev DBA, thanks for renewing your subscription. I just got that working again yesterday, like the alerts. It's been forever since I've had those working. Uh, so yeah, heading out to Telluride, Colorado. It's about a 10-hour drive. Realistically, at the way I drive, it's probably 11 hours driving between here and there, which is well past the limit of what I usually want to do in a day. But I'm kind of racing out there to spend just a few days out in Telluride and then doing a one long day drive back. We'll see how it goes. I'm taking the Jag out. Originally, we had wanted to take the Porsche 356, the little coupe we bought, but unfortunately, it isn't quite ready yet, so have to kind of wait on that one. Default Blame Acceptor says, love the water curtains and waterfalls. Oh, yeah. The backyard is really starting to look sharp. They're working on it as we speak, which is kind of cool, putting in more stonework, so that's kind of cool. There won't be a live stream tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be out on the road at like the crack of dawn. And then I think, let me look at the calendar. I don't think there's one next Wednesday either. Let me go take a quick look. No, Wednesday. No, next week we're fine. Next week's the normal schedule. It's the week after that, I think. No, I take that back. We have office hours for like the next 3 weeks, and we're good. And then after that, we're back to. I'm going to be back to taking off to Iceland. So going there for a week. Oslo and Gothenburg, Sweden. Be fun. Good morning, Jim, as well. So originally I was going to do a Dead by Daylight stream this morning. The computer's pretty much set up in my home theater, but because I'm not doing a live stream tomorrow and because there are so many good questions in the queue, I was like, screw it, I'm just going to go do a live stream. Originally when I looked the first time, there were a bunch of terrible questions in the queue, but there are actually good ones in there now, so let's kick that off. T-Man says, hi, BO. This is why I don't use my first and last initials. I use BGO normally when I like sign things. G, I suppose, stands for goofball. A friend has multiple distributed AGs but needs to share data with each of the DAG DBs. Any near real-time architecture ideas so they can stop doing batch ETLs? Adding replication on top of AGs can work, but yuck. I don't think I understand the question, and I don't think this is really good for a short text question, because when you say that, my first thought is just add another database. Add another database and put it in either an availability group or do log shipping. Now, when you say near real time, I start to get really nervous because even availability groups aren't necessarily near real time. Async replication can break. But this is one of the reasons that people hire me for consulting is to sketch out ideas like this, and we gather the business requirements, and I talk to the business and say, okay, make sure that based on what you're saying here, this is going to be a 7-figure spend. Is that really something that you want to do? So to help to kind of level set some of those expectations with the different requests that they're asking for, but it's pretty far beyond what you can get for free out quickly in a Q&A format like this. Good morning, DK Kimbo. Next up, BigData says, adding a server login during peak times is causing deadlocks. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. So here's what you need to do instead. Add groups. Set up groups with the permission that you want and add people in and out of those groups. That's way easier, so that way you're not trying to change production. You don't even have to touch SQL Server Live at all during production when this is happening. If you've got your group set up ahead of time, then adding people in and out of those in Active Directory is a piece of cake. So that's what you should be doing instead. Next up, Reluctantly Tolerant says, we are using Amazon's FSxN, managed NetApp ONTAP, provision for yada, yada, yada. The database files are fragmented. You're not even understanding the question. He says, how can I fix this and prevent reoccurrence? So first off, you're saying that there are 2,000 IOPS happening at the database level, translating into 50,000 at the disk level. Yes, that's how NetApp works. NetApp works with very small allocation units, basically, or cluster sizes, you can think of them as. NetApp storage is broken up into really tiny chunks. Think 4K, for example. But when SQL Server is doing a big old table scan, SQL Server will ask for 64K or 512K all at once. To SQL Server, that's just one input-output operation, IO operation per second. Hey, welcome, GS Volt. That's just one operation to SQL Server. Give me 64K, especially if you've got your disk set up in 64K NTFS allocation units. But at the storage level, if you take 64K, if NetApp is breaking that into 4K chunks, 64 divided by 4, I suck really bad at math, but that's a lot. You're basically amplifying your read request by a lot. That's how NetApp works. So how can you fix this? This is going to sound goofy, but you add memory. If you add memory, then you're going to be able to cache the data in RAM and you won't have to repeatedly ask for it from disk. Memory covers all kinds of sins. So if you're talking about read operations being the problem, that's the first place that I'd start. Next up, let's see here. Eli says, "Hi Brent, I've observed a hash match operator performing 1,000 times slower when table B is first in a join but no spill. Table is many to many. From an internals perspective, what makes B first so much slower?" I would really need to see the execution plan, because I don't know if one of those is the right execution plan and one is the wrong one. I don't know if SQL Server is timing out when it's building the execution plans. I don't know if there are bad indexes involved. I don't know if there's an incorrect estimation that's involved. It's just too tough to see without the actual execution plans. Not the estimates, but the actual execution plans. Tim says, "Is there a way to capture any connection to the DAC? I'm seeing an error from a nightly scan that there's another connection preventing access, but I can never seem to catch it. Could something else be causing this same error?" Yeah, the way that I like to catch it is if you go to brentozar.com/go/DAC, brentozar.com/go/DAC, DAC. We have a query in there that will show you what's connected to the DAC right now. And you can run it from a regular session. You don't have to be connected to the DAC in order to run it. And it'll give you things like the login name and the machine name that it's coming from. So that way you can track down who's using it. It's one of those things that if you wanted to hook it up to a monitoring tool, like if you're using any kind of SQL Server monitoring tool that allows you to create custom alerts, that's a nice, easy way to say, hey, someone's connected to the DAC. Here's who it is. Go do something about it. You can also set that up via SQL agent job. If you know the time when it's happening overnight, you could set it up to run and log to a table every so many seconds there. Next up, Pete says, "Why would a bitwise operation on a table join cause a query to run long?" My guess is that it's not something that's sargeable and SQL, and this is just a guess because I can't see the query, right? Without knowing what the query is. It's like, "How does my dog's breath smell so bad?" And I'm like, well, the possibilities are endless there, Pete. But just generally speaking, with this, it's probably that the operation isn't sargeable and SQL Server is having to scan through the entire table. DK Kimball also adds, because nobody understands how to write bitwise operations correctly. And I count myself in that group. I would totally have to hit books online or whoever's written recently about this. I can't remember if it was Solomon. Can't remember who it was that I saw a blog post from on bitwise operations last time. But generally speaking, because it's not sargeable, SQL Server is probably going to have to scan through whatever it is because of the way that we wrote that bitwise operation. Especially if it refers to multiple columns. I've seen people say, go get these two columns and then say, if this and this are true, well, SQL Server is going to have to scan every row in order to find out if that's true. What you could think about doing instead is a trigger. I know people are like, oh God, triggers. But if it's comparing two columns in the same row and those columns don't change very often, that's a perfect use case for a trigger that updates another column. And then that way, that column is seekable really quickly. Oh boy, next up, Sonakshi asks, what did database administrator Brent? Oh yeah, G-Surgeon says Solomon must mean Solomon Rutsky. That's true. What did DBA Brent do for physical fitness? I ran half marathons. That wasn't self-motivated. It's because I sat right next to a guy, Ben Block. Shout out to Ben. And Ben would run half marathons. And Ben was not the kind of body type that you usually associate with a runner. Usually when you think about someone who runs marathons, you think of someone who's made out of like spaghetti. You know, they're like super thin and you can see the muscles on their body, and they eat raw chicken breasts for lunch. Ben was a normal person. And so I was like, Ben, so why do you do that? And Ben's like, oh, it's all about being comfortable. If you can be comfortable while you're running, you can go a surprisingly long distance. And I was like, what do you mean be comfortable? And he gave me this book, The Non-Runner's Guide to Running Marathons. And this book was based off of a college course that a professor used to run, where in the course of one semester, he would take you from 0 to running a full marathon. And the book was really good. Like, I really got it. It absolutely changed my life. I was able to run, I think I did 3 or 4 half marathons, maybe 5 or 6. I don't quite remember. Half marathons. I trained for a full-blown marathon, and my longest run was 18 miles. Jim Van Allen says, is it like a Running for Dummies book? Yeah, absolutely. But it's really focused on marathons, which is good. So I'm amazed at how good that book was. I never ended up running the marathon, and I can't remember why. Something happened. I can't remember if me or Erica got sick or what it was. Like we had an accident or something, but we ended up having something that broke our training routine, and so we couldn't end up doing it. But that was what I loved as a database administrator. One of the gotchas was Bob the Lobster says, I bet Sonakshi regrets that question now. One of the gotchas was on your long run days, on the long run days where you train up gradually like 8, 10, 12 miles, you're away from the computer for a really long time. And if you're the kind of database administrator who's on call, that can make things difficult. It also makes a difference where you live. For example, I lived in Florida at the time, and during the summer, the long runs were brutal, were really, really bad. But if you live in a place that has seasons, it's really not so bad. It isn't something that I would recommend in Vegas, obviously. Jim Van Allen says Jim Fix was a runner and he dropped dead at 40. Yeah, Jim Van Allen's got a great point, because someone ran once and they died. We should probably not ever run again. I think that's what he's saying. Next up, Golshifteh says, in addition to Ozar training, what are the top things that SQL DBAs should be doing to future-proof their careers? I think what you should be doing is asking your business, the people who are in your business, hey, what are your plans for data storage for the next 5, 10 years? Like, as you build a new application, what backends are you looking out, or you're looking to use? Oatmeal and Chill says, you've inspired me to go out to 3 to 4 miles at lunch today. Thanks. That's funny given your name, Oatmeal and Chill. It's kind of cute. So if you talk to your business and see, what are the other places that they're looking at storing data, and then ask why, because you don't always have control over it. Sometimes the developers are like, we're going to use MongoDB and here's why, and you don't get anything to say about it. But you want to talk to them and say, okay, cool, why? What made you decide to go with MongoDB? And just listen. Don't challenge. I know as database people, we're often very personally and religiously tied to the database that we use. So we could try to defend, well, SQL Server can do that too. Just shut up and listen. Just listen to whatever it is that they're saying. and then go investigate that with MongoDB. Why do, and I'm just picking MongoDB as an example. Why is it that people feel that way? Why are they going towards it? And what attracts you or what is interesting to you about that? And it might be a platform that you want to go learn. DK Kimbo says this shirt makes him want some bubble gum, right? It totally has the bubblicious kind of lettering going across it. I absolutely love that. Ollie the DBA says, at what point do you think the cons outweigh the pros of automation? For me, it's any time when someone says, oh, I have to do this once, I'll automate it. Well, how long is that automation taking? Are you doing this just to sharpen your knives to get better at the automation? Or are you doing this because you think you found a golden hammer and you want to bang that thing against everything? When PowerShell first came out, I saw a lot of people who, anytime a help question would come out on SQL Help or dba.stackexchange.com, people would be like, you could do that with PowerShell. But people are like, but I don't. I'm not good at that. I want to just do this thing the one time. Yes, but you could do it with PowerShell. You could learn an entire language just to do this one task. And so for me, a lot of it is do you know already how to do the thing, and is it going to be quickly done with the language that you already know, or is it something where you're going to go spend 3 days in the garage workshop trying to figure out how something works that you could have just bought off the shelf? Bilal asks, what are your top memories from your visits to the Microsoft Redmond campus? Oh, okay, I haven't thought about this in advance. So for people who work at Microsoft, this is probably going to sound kind of weird. Number one, the coffee maker. Microsoft buildings at the time had a bunch of really cool Starbucks coffee makers that produced pretty good quality coffee. And so it was totally automatic. You could get whatever drink that you wanted. And it was, I've been to plenty of offices with coffee makers, but these were consistently good and consistently in every building. And that was kind of nice. The fact that almost all of the office workers, people who were receptionists, janitors, security, etc., were all contractors. That was really weird to me. That so many of the people involved were contractors. So those are the two big first things that stand up. The accessibility, the Microsoft put a whole lot of work into accessibility of their offices. They were bright. Everything that they built recently in like the last 10 years was bright, open, welcoming, all that. Those are probably my top things that stand out to me about the campus. Now, of course, about the people, I mean, they're just filled with brilliant people. I'm going to say something that's going to sound hard to believe. Everyone that I know who works at Microsoft, the company, not the contractors, I don't know like the receptionists or anything, but the people that I know who work at Microsoft were pretty much across the board brilliant. And they were very humble, but not always. They were not always humble, but they were usually very sharp and endlessly curious, that they wanted to know stuff and not necessarily wanted to know stuff about the competition or weren't necessarily open-minded, but they were brilliant and wanted to know things about at least the products inside their own company. I would also say another word that I would use to describe Microsoft staff is overwhelmed. That everyone that I know from Microsoft works too hard for too long of hours without having a good work-life balance. And that when people go to work at Microsoft, they just disappear from the community because they have no hours left. They don't have any time left to do things in their spare time for tech communities anymore because their whole life is taken up by that job. There it is. Next up, Mooney Flyer says, kind of a silly question, why Statistics IO on doesn't give any information about written pages? I never thought about that. I don't know if it does or doesn't. I have no idea. I never used Stats.io for that because I didn't measure writes at an individual query level because I can't really tune it. If I need to do an insert, update, or delete, it's not like I can tune the execution plan to do less writes. I can tune it to do less reads, but I can't tune it to do less writes. So I guess that's probably the answer, is that you couldn't do anything with that information. It says, is there a way to get this information? I'm trying to give hard evidence to indexing naysayers on the real impact of adding an index to a table. You don't need stats.io for that. Use the index usage DMVs. Look at SP Blitz Index, for example, and there are columns in there for writes that'll tell you how many writes an index has had. Then that way you can say, okay, based on this table right here, we have these 6 extra copies of the table, these 6 non-clustered indexes. They've had this many writes, and they're taking up this much space. Based on that, it probably makes sense to remove them. But that's, if you want writes, that's where I'd start. Next up, Bjorn says, is it okay to use page lock hints in conjunction with delete top X from dbo.Foo to prevent lock escalation? No, absolutely, positively not. Instead, go Google for Brent Ozar, how to delete just some rows from a really big table. And I give you the exact technique in there to avoid lock escalation. It's a technique called fast ordered deletes that, as far as I know, was originally written by Microsoft. It's just that they took that page down in their endless shuffle of blog posts. So Brent Ozar, you could also search for Brent Ozar fast ordered deletes, and that'll probably get it. Grimlock asks, what is the optimal nap time and duration? And have you always followed this? Everyone is different, but I'll give you the answer for me. For me, 45 minutes. At 45 minutes, I can wake up naturally in most cases. Sometimes I have to set an alarm, like if I know I have an event at a certain time that I have to go to, but most of the time I just wake up naturally after around 45 minutes and I feel refreshed and I'm ready to go tackle the day. To the second part of the day, I always think of the time before the nap as my work time, and then after nap is playtime. You know, like I get to go play video games or go out to dinner or whatever it is that I want to go do. So for me, that's the answer. Not everyone has that same answer. For example, Eve, my partner, will often take a nap for an hour, 15 hour, 20 minutes and can't get back up, is like, you know, gone for 2 hours and lying in bed, can't restart the day after that. I know other people who do a 15-minute nap and set an alarm for that, and after the 15 minutes, they feel recharged. I could never do that. I would be exhausted. Next up, Alex asks, do you have any experience or thoughts on using non-SQL Server technology for replication such as Zerto? Yes, I have plenty of experience and plenty of thoughts about those. Now, the things that I'm about to say aren't necessarily specific to Zerto. The one thing that I'm going to say is, if you're doing synchronous replication and it's not built into SQL Server, then the worst case scenario is multiple databases that are all active at the same time, sharing the same volume. Because typically things like any kind of synchronous storage replication, not necessarily Zerto, anything that's trying to do synchronous, and that's the important part, is that it'll issue each write in order, one at a time, waiting for confirmation to come back across the network wire that that write has finished. That is a bottleneck disaster for high performance databases. If you don't need high performance, it's probably fine. It's not really that big of a deal. In terms of asynchronous replication, that kind of goes away because you can do batch writes with these tools. Then the nice thing about these tools is they usually give you lots of points at which you can restore to. So you can say, well, I want to go live to as of my database, how it looked 15 minutes ago, and you can get up and running with that fairly quickly. So it's nice. Where I like those tools is when you don't have a production DBA and you want high availability, More disaster recovery. High availability, we think of automatic failover. Disaster recovery is manual failover with some data loss. That's where those tools really shine, giving you the ability to have disaster recovery without a production database administrator. Next up, Vangelis asks, what are the top SQL full text issues that you see with your clients? Far and away, there's just one issue, and that's performance. That when you have queries that are doing multiple filters, like for example, they're saying, show me these items where this full text part matches and the user allowed to see it is inside this list. Whenever they have multiple filters, full text, and something else, performance is usually terrible at scale because SQL Server will find all the documents that match the full text and all the rows that match this filter and then join them. That's exactly why we had to move Stack Overflow away from full text search like more than a decade ago because it just couldn't scale. For small stuff, it's fine though. Next up, Demet asks, does the DBA role for non-relational databases differ much from that of relational databases? So when we think of DBA roles, there are two roles involved with that. Hey, Spitfire. One is production DBA and one is development DBA. Both of those roles change in different ways. A lot of non-relational database administrators, make sure I get that right, that are doing production work like backups, restores, whatever. They're not DBAs at all. They're sysadmins because it's just a relatively straightforward piece of software where they can restore relatively quickly. And also those kinds of platforms tend to be the ones that are designed to deploy out with an army of VMs or pizza boxes. Hey, West District. So the production DBA work tends to be much simpler there. For development DBA work, things like query tuning, it tends to be more about changing the database schema to match the documents that you need to find quickly. And in that case, the development DBA is usually just the developers. DK Kimbo follows up with, what did you move Stack Overflow to in place of full text? If you search for Brent Ozar full text Stack Overflow, I've got a big long blog post that explains what the problems were, what we moved it to. I say we moved it. I had no work in whatsoever with the new destination of where it went to. I didn't have to deal with that. West District, check out the URL on the screen right below me. You can post your questions there, and I answer the top voted ones there. Oh, Arduku, welcome to the channel. Pareesh says, when doing one database per customer for multi-tenant, what's the max number of databases that you should not exceed when using availability groups? So when availability groups first came out, Microsoft's internal test case was 100 databases, if I remember right, with 2 replicas, like the primary and the secondary. Beyond that, in newer versions of SQL Server, they've had higher test case numbers, but they've never really explained what those numbers are. So what you want to search for is SQL Server availability groups, what not to do. SQL Server availability groups, what not to do. And there's a great blog post on Simple Talk by a Warwick Rudd, I believe. Warwick Rudd out of New Zealand, either New Zealand or Australia, I always forget, that talks about the problem that you'll run into, worker thread exhaustion, as you add more and more databases. For me, for multi-tenant, I just tell customers, you don't want to be on availability groups. That's not the right answer. What you want is failover cluster plus log shipping. That makes a much better fit. Let's see here. Stu says, at what point do you think a software developer should look for a new job? I'm going to zoom back out and I'm going to say, when do you think anyone should look for a new job? I think you should always be passively interviewing. You should keep your resume up to date. Set yourself a little reminder in whatever task management thing you use that once a quarter or once every 6 months, you should go update your resume. And you should have it out there. And the way that you should do it is you should just say, when you blog about, when you write about, when you answer questions at Stack Overflow, say, if you need help with this, contact me. And then that leaves it kind of open that maybe people are going to ask you questions for help, and maybe they're going to try to hire you for a new job. And you should always be open to those requests when they come in, because the time to get a new job isn't when you're desperate. The best time to get a new job is when you're comfortable, because you have a great bargaining position. You don't give a damn whether they give you the job or not. You've got a job. If they want you, they're going to have to pay for you, and they're going to have to give you a compelling case as to why you should switch over. That's attractive to people too as well. The ones who play hard to get actually do better, so you should always be looking. Next up, West asks, what are your thoughts about Microsoft Fabric and its data warehouse ability? If you search for Brent Ozar Microsoft Fabric, I wrote up a blog post on it. The short answer is Microsoft has changed their data warehouse vision every 3 years for the last 20 years. Hey, we're making this acquisition. It's called Data Allegro. We're going to integrate it into Microsoft, and we're going to be right back. Hey, we got this thing called Parallel Data Warehouse. I know you think that it's got partial MySQL underneath it, but it's not. We're going to work on removing that and replacing it with SQL Server. Be right back. Hey, we got this thing called the Analytics Platform System. Hey, we're going to use Hadoop underneath it. It's going to be amazing. We'll get back to you on how it works. Be right back. Hey, we got this thing called Azure Parallel something or other. I forget what they called it. Things are going to be great. Azure Data Warehouse. It's going to be amazing. Learn about it right away and implement it. We'll be right back. Hey, we're renaming this Azure Synapse Analytics. Same thing. We're just switching a few things around here. We'll get back to you as soon as it's done. Be right back. Hey, got this new thing called Microsoft Fabric. It's the bomb. Now, it's not quite ready yet. It's only in pre-release, but you can check it out. And don't poke around too closely. We'll get back to you as soon as it's done. And it just keeps being like this. I feel genuinely sorry for any consultant who has to say with a straight face, yeah, you should adopt this Microsoft data warehouse technology. They are freaking insane. So that's my thought on that one. Next up, we're at time. I should actually stop there. We've been going for half an hour there. I probably was going for half an hour there with all of Microsoft's names for all of their data warehousing features. So I will stop here. Remember, we're not going to do West District says, to sum up, Microsoft Fabric sucks. So for me, it's just that it's another brand new product that they're going to abandon in 3 years. Why would you waste 1 minute of your life and career getting good at something that has an expiration date stamped across its forehead? That if you open every one of the prior products, you're like, smells like diapers and spoiled milk. If they do that for like 10 releases in a row, why would you open the 11th bottle? You know what it's going to smell like. At which point the Microsoft people go, it's going to be different this time. Sure it is, buddy. Sure it is. SQL Dev DBA says Guy in a Cube has a great video on Fabric as well. Guy in a Cube works for Microsoft. So I would just point that out there. I love Guy in a Cube. Patrick and Adam are amazing people. They're really good at what they do, but they are also paid by Microsoft. Now, granted, that channel is independent, but they have a vested interest in not pointing out that it smells like diapers and spoiled milk. So there you go. All right, so as a reminder, no webcast tomorrow. I won't be doing a live stream tomorrow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my camera gear with me to Telluride on the road trip, and I will film a couple of office hour sessions in there. So you can still put in your questions over at polgab.com/room/Brento. And I'll answer those questions just disconnected and then publish those up on YouTube. Next week, on next Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be back here at the regularly scheduled time, and I will see y'all back there. Ooh, Default Blame Acceptor is going to Jamaica for 2 weeks next week. Nice. I love the Caribbean, especially this time of year. Oh, it's just wonderful. I mean, it's hot, but that's kind of the fun of the Caribbean. West District says, I just saw your car collection. Great ones. Thank you. I haven't taken pictures of, I have two more cars that you may not have seen. I have a Ferrari 328 and a Porsche 356. And I haven't put too much of those up on the Instagram or whatever, because they're both in the midst of getting restored. The Ferrari's probably another 2 months from being finished. The Porsche will probably be finished first, which will be kind of cool. So thanks a lot, and I will see y'all next time. Adios. Oh, the button's not working. Oh, of course it's not working.